Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves win their second straight game by beating the Pelicans in New Orleans. Zion Williamson's return, and the Timberwolves handled it well enough. There were some offensive challenges, but a really hot start by Anthony Edwards was the highlight of this one. We'll break the whole game down next. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day. And the Timberwolves have won 2 in a row, which is, we're doing this win 3, lose 3 thing, I guess, for all of the winter is kind of what we've, I guess, decided to do, or at least since Thanksgiving is what it feels like. But the Wolves are on the upswing right now of the roller coaster. They've won 2 in a row. Yes, the Pelicans are lowly. Yes, they're like the second worst team in the league, but it was Zion Williamson's return. Ant had another monster start, and there were some other positives along the way. We'll also talk about the biggest concern, which is something that we haven't talked a lot about on the show, but it's kind of been an underlying issue, tangential to some other problems related to the Wolves' backcourt. And it's what reared its ugly head in the third quarter when the Wolves actually got down by 8 to this Pelicans team. So we'll talk about that on the show today, too. So a lot to get to. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder about the new newsletter as well, LockedOnDaily.com. Head over there, sign up for the Locked On Wolves newsletter. You'll get one to your inbox every Monday through Friday, and it'll be all about this show from yours truly, as well as some national NBA articles, some links to other Wolves coverage around the internet. So lots to get there from the newsletter. Again, you can sign up at LockedOnDaily.com. All right. So the high point for this one, we have to start with the start to the game that Anthony Edwards had. And of course, Ant last Saturday, like 4 days ago, had his 53-point game in the loss to the Pistons. And as I've covered on the show, talked about quite a bit the last couple of days, it was actually a really great performance, which you should never need to say about a 53-point game. But they lost by 14 to a mediocre team. He had only 2 assists. And so if you didn't watch the game, you'd be like, all right, 6 turnovers, 2 assists, 53 points, they lose. Bad game. No. Ant actually was decisive. He made good passes. His teammates missed shots. He had some hockey assists in this game. It was a good game. Last time out, they beat the Clippers by only a bucket. They won by 2 points, and Ant had 37, 8, and 7, and was 6 of 13 outside the arc. And 48% for the floor. 6 of 13 is nearly 50% from 3 as well. A great performance. This time out, he scores 32 points. So he already had the most points or tied for the most points in 2 consecutive games in Wolves history with Karl-Anthony Towns with 90 through 2 games. Now, over the last 3 games, Anthony Edwards has scored 122 points over the last 3 games, which, of course, is a Timberwolves record over a course of a span of 3 games. So, 122 over 3 games is what? An average of basically 40 points per game. Just a hair under 40 points per game. So, Ant's playing well. And during the stretch, he's over 50% from 3 on volume. He shot, 39 threes over the last 3 games, and he's made 23 of them. He's 23 of 39 over the last 3 games. It doesn't update in Basketball Reference until tomorrow, so I'm doing the math now. That's 59% from 3. 23 of 39, 59% from 3 over the last 3 games. He's not 2 of 6 each game. He's shooting 60% on volume, averaging 13 attempts per game over the last 3. He's around 50% from the floor over the last 3. And he's rebounding the basketball, too. It's something that he's done a lot more of late, and Chris Finch has challenged him to do so. Overall this season, his rebounding's been very good. That's a topic for another day. But in this game, he had 9 rebounds as well, which was a key component. But the Wolves got up by double figures early in the first quarter because Ant just couldn't miss. He was bombs away from 3. He had one mid-range shot that he makes in there, but it was like all threes, nothing in the paint. And it didn't matter because he was absolutely piping hot. He finally missed a couple toward the end of the quarter. And the Wolves, nothing else was really working. It was all about Ant shooting threes. And the Pelicans stormed right back, and it was just a 1-point lead at the end of the first quarter. And it was pretty it felt disappointing on the one hand to waste Ant's first quarter performance, but on the other hand, without it, they would have been losing by, a dozen points. So it's basically why the Wolves were up at the end of the first quarter, because the defense wasn't very good either. They gave up 33 points to a bottom 3 offensive team. Yes, they have Zion Williamson back for the first time in 2 months, and that's important. But their offense looked pretty clunky to start too. The Wolves had a couple misses in transition. They didn't cycle out to contest 3-point shooters. It was a poor final 4 or 5 minutes of the first quarter for Minnesota. The second quarter was just a complete slop fest for both teams. Neither team could get going offensively. Minnesota just couldn't make shots, and they turned the ball over a bunch too. Really kind of middle stages of the game, second, early third quarter, and finished with 2 more turnovers than New Orleans. I mean, it continues to be a massive problem for Minnesota. This was a tie game at halftime. And yes, I know Zion was back, but it should not have been a tie game at halftime. It was just missed open shots, which was a problem against the Pistons on Saturday. It was a problem at times against the Clippers. Guys like Nikhil, who was 2 for 6. Naz was 1 for 5 from 3, although he played well overall. Jaden was 1 for 6 after being 3 for 3 the night prior. Julius was 1 for 4 from 3. So besides, Dante was 2 for 8. Besides Anthony Edwards, you take out Anthony Edwards, and the Timberwolves shot the ball terribly from outside the arc. They made 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threes as a team. They were 8 for 33 from outside the arc if you take out Anthony Edwards' performance. So 8 for 33, doing a lot of math today, is 24%. So without Ant, they were 24% from 3 on decent volume, 44 attempts, like right in line with what they typically do. So it was a really good thing that Ant was as hot as he was early in the game, because the offense just was not exactly humming in this game, and they didn't quite take advantage of enough fast break opportunities either. New Orleans did, and we'll talk about that. Actually, we can talk about it now. Third quarter was a nightmare for the Wolves, and I want to spend a little bit of time on what the biggest problem was, but quickly, it was just forcing turnovers. Minnesota's turnovers were terrible early in the third quarter, and this was with the new starting lineup on the floor. So Dante, no Mike Conley, so it was Ant, and it was Jaden, it was Julius Randle, and these guys are getting stripped by the Pelicans in the backcourt. You got to deal with Jose Alvarado, who's just an absolute beast, swarms people. It felt like he played way more than 20 minutes in this game. I thought every time I looked up, he was on the court. I don't know how he only played 20 minutes, and I also don't know how he only got 1 steal. But Alvarado, among others, swarming in the backcourt, making life difficult for Minnesota, and it helped spur. New Orleans had 31 fast break points in this game. And they had 28 points off of Timberwolves turnovers, which, again, it felt like more than that, frankly, in this game. But a lot of that was in the third quarter, allowed New Orleans to build an 8-point lead. And I want to spend a little bit more time on the ball handling. I guess we'll call it elephants in the room. So I want to do that next. We'll talk about the game close and overall, the key takeaways from this one. We'll hit those key points, then we'll close with individual studs and duds. So we'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Ultimate College Basketball HC. I want to take a moment to introduce you to a brand new mobile game that I'm really excited about, Ultimate College Basketball HC. If you've ever dreamed of being a college basketball head coach, this is your chance to step into those shoes. In Ultimate College Basketball HC, you control every detail of your program, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, handling NIL deals, and managing scholarships. It's all in your hands. When it comes to game time, you get to draw up offensive plays and set your strategy. That the way you play won't just affect the current season, it will shape the future of your school's basketball program. It's a game that lets you feel the full weight of what it means to be a head coach and lead your team to glory. Here's a special offer from Locked On NBA listeners, or for Locked On NBA listeners, I should say. Use promo code Locked On CBB, all caps, inside the game store to get a free boost for your program. Again, that's promo code Locked On CBB, LOCKEDON CBB, all caps, to get a free boost for your program. It's the perfect way to kickstart your coaching career. To download Ultimate College Basketball HC, just visit ultimate-cbb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Basketball HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so let's talk about the issue about what happened in the third quarter of this game. So handling defensive ball pressure from opponents has been a recurring issue for Minnesota. And I've talked about the lack of point guards, just period, like full stop, lack of point guards on the roster for Minnesota quite a bit in the past. And we haven't really like keyed in on this specific issue in terms of turnovers, and not just that, but costly live ball turnovers in the middle of the floor that are going to hurt you immediately. Haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. And we saw that a lot in this game, especially early in the third quarter. Clearly, the Pelicans came out of the locker room at halftime and said, look, it's a tie game. We can play harder than them. We have DeJounte Murray. We have Jose Alvarado. We've got guys that can wreak havoc. Herbert Jones. Like, I mean, those three right there, like Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, and Jose Alvarado are absolute pit bulls defensively. And you add in like, you know, a young big like Misi, who's clearly got some potential. You get Zion in the open floor, you get McCollum in the open floor, who had a terrible game. But I mean, I know that they're bad. I know they're now 7-30, but that's exactly the type of team that the Wolves have struggled with. And it's one of the, like, they have Orlando upcoming. Like, that could be a tough game. They've got a lot of young guys that play hard. That kind of culture of that team, even without Paolo Banchero and others, like that sort of thing can give the Wolves fits. I mean, like OKC is a great example, like, you know, to an extreme level, because they're one of the best teams in the league. And they're just like amazing at both ends of the floor. But the way they play defensively, swarming to the basketball, using length, athleticism, size, and again, effort is paramount to all those things. That's what we saw in the third quarter, and the Wolves really struggle with it. Ant turned the ball over at the timeline, basically, and that was an easy bucket for DeJounte Murray, gave the Pelicans a lead. Then he turns it over again. A very next possession, and Zion gets his 360 dunk. Wolves come down, quick miss from Dante, and Pelicans score on the other end. Next time down the floor, Julius Randle loses the ball at the timeline, leads to another Zion dunk in transition, and it was a quick 8-0 run. 7 or 8-1 run, maybe? 7-0 run? I don't know. They went from tied at halftime to down 7. Yeah, so it would have been a 7-0 run. A quick 7-0 run. Eventually, the Wolves get down by as many as 8 a little bit later in the quarter. But it was 2 Ant turnovers and a Julius Randle turnover. But, like, those are the guys that are handling the ball for Minnesota with that lineup. Like, I know Dante's on the floor, and he's played point guard at the bench unit. But as we talked about on yesterday's show, it's why Mike Conley actually makes sense as a fit with the bench, is because he can actually have the ball in his hands a little bit more and initiate, get off the ball, come back and get a catch and shoot, maybe even find his own shot a little bit. But with Randle alongside Ant, Conley's not initiating anything with the starting lineup. And that, you know, in general is a better thing for Dante DiVincenzo, which I also talked about on Monday's show, or I guess it would have been Tuesday's show, because DiVincenzo can play with the ball in his hands, but as a scorer, not as somebody who's looking to facilitate for others. And that's obviously Randle's and Ant's goal as well. But the way that they go about it and the gravity that they have is a bit different than what DiVincenzo does. The advantage Randle has when he's got the ball in his hands with a head of steam is different than Dante DiVincenzo. The way Ant draws a crowd is different because DiVincenzo doesn't, you know, draw 2 defenders. So it's all a little bit different. And the DiVincenzo fit with the starters makes sense. But this is where it's an issue. None of these guys are point guards. Like, Dante handles pressure fine, but again, he's not bringing the ball up the floor. Julius doesn't handle pressure fine if you're actually putting guys that can steal the ball from him on him. And Ant generally does a good job, but if you're going to double him the second he hits the timeline, then like it's going to get dicey quick. And it did 2 straight possessions for Minnesota. So the Wolves then called a timeout and, you know, kind of reset themselves a little bit. And you know, they ended up, of course, being fine. They scored right out of the timeout. They had a nice play ran for Randle to get a dunk. And they settled down a little bit. Didn't have any of those, you know, that same, you know, that same variety of turnovers. In fact, they forced like 3-4 quick turnovers on New Orleans. climb back, and Ant hits the three to give the Wolves a lead with 7 minutes to play. And I think, let's see, they took it back with about 6 minutes to play in the third and never gave it all the way back. It obviously got a little dicier than it should have late in the fourth quarter. But it was because they stopped turning it over. Like, that's obviously the quickest way to let a team back into the game, especially a bad team with an inefficient offense like New Orleans, is just handing them the ball in the middle of the floor and saying, hey, go get a dunk in transition. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a 360 dunk in the middle of a game. And that happened to the Wolves in this game, because it was like this stretch of 3 minutes where it was like the sky was falling and this is the end, right? Like, this is what we felt for a time on Monday against the Clippers when they were down 15, 16 in the first half, which maybe means we're all a little bit dramatic because of this roller coaster that the Wolves have put us on this year. But that continues to be kind of an underlying storyline, an underlying theme for the Wolves this year, is the lack of true primary ball handlers on this team. And they went into last year knowing that too. And it obviously turned out okay to the tune of a conference finals appearance. But with Shake Milton and Nick Alexander-Walker as essentially your backup point guard. I know Jordan McLaughlin was on the team and did play important minutes, but the Wolves never set out to make him like the have the backup point guard role, even if he did at times because he had to. There's nobody else this year. And they just waived Daisha Nix, who's the only other guy that has any experience as an NBA point guard. He's the only other point guard on the roster besides Mike Conley. Like, Mike Conley's one of 16 guys, 15 guys on this roster, and nobody else is an actual point guard. So that could be an issue against teams like this. We saw it against OKC last week. We saw it in this game against the Pelicans. We'll see it against Orlando later this week. Thursday, I guess, next time out. So hopefully the Wolves can find a way to alleviate some of that pressure. But that's something to certainly look out for here moving forward, and something that could rear its ugly head at pretty inopportune moments. The fourth quarter, we got to give props to Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. This was the bench show. Nickeil had a really strong game at his old stomping grounds in New Orleans. And he only played 18 minutes. Like, the only guy that played less than him was Josh Minott that saw the floor. He played 6 minutes. It wasn't a loud performance except for that stretch kind of early fourth quarter. And Naz was only 1 of 5 on threes, but he was 5-11 on twos and was aggressive. He had multiple baskets where he was curling and cutting to the basket on the move, getting the basketball on the move, because whoever's guarding Naz is going to be trailing him in that situation and not have the length or athleticism to catch up, get a real rear contest on his shot or, ever seriously challenge it. And Naz was great. 13 points, 12 rebounds. But again, the activity level, moving without the basketball on the offensive side of the floor, and also 6 offensive rebounds for Naz Reid. We don't always see that level of activity. Naz, a lot of times, and I don't mean this as a slight, Naz is very comfortable as a catch and shoot guy on the perimeter because he's good at it. And typically whoever's guarding him, the Wolves are fine with him dragging that particular big away from the paint in most cases. But Naz was more active without the ball in his hands in this game. And that's important for the Wolves, especially a team like Minnesota that struggles so much offensively. When one of Ant or Randle aren't going well, they need a punch from somebody. And in this game, it was Naz. I mean, he was third on the team in scoring in this game, and he got up 16 shots, which was second on the team. Again, not super efficient overall, 13 points on 16 shots. It's one of those you box score watch and you're like, inefficient Naz game, 3 turnovers. He did have the 12 boards, but if you watch what he did in the fourth quarter, he was great. And you can look through that early fourth quarter, play-by-play, and you can see it. It was Naz made the first bucket, Randle makes a bucket, then it's Naz, then it's Nickeil, then it's Naz, then it's Naz again. There's another Alexander Walker in there somewhere. I'm confident of it. I guess maybe he did a little more late third quarter. But Naz and Nickeil were great for Minnesota. And now that the bench trio is no longer technically the bench trio with Dante DiVincenzo starting the last couple of games, Naz and Nickeil have to hold it down. And they have to provide what they've been providing all season. And they did that in this game. A really solid performance from those guys. So I would say overall takeaways in this one were the good was Ant continues to be awesome. And I know that he had a bit of a cold close. I should mention the fourth quarter, he missed I think all 5 field goal attempts, including an alley-oop dunk that would have sealed the game, but he missed it with 45 seconds left. And the Pelicans got a dunk, or got a 3 on the other end to make it a 1-possession game. It was a huge miss. And it wasn't like a bad play. He just missed the dunk because it was an open 2-on-1 in a fast break. Randle to Ant. It was a decent pass. So that was tough. Ant missed every other shot he took. He took more mid-range shots in the fourth than you'd like to see. But again, 32 points on 21 shots, 7 of 11 on threes, 9 boards for Ant. Just a really good Ant performance. That's one of the key takeaways. Julius was good. We'll talk about him in studs and duds. Rudy was awesome in the paint. I talked a little earlier about the protecting the paint overall. Actually, should spend more time on that. Rudy did have 14 rebounds, 4 assists, and 6 blocks in this game for Rudy Gobert. The Pelicans did have 13 offensive rebounds, and Misi, their rookie big, had 4 offensive rebounds. Zion had 4 himself. That's just kind of what he does. I talked about this yesterday on the show, that being a concern in this game, and it was. They got 13 offensive rebounds, but the Pelicans just didn't make enough shots, which is kind of what most teams bank on against them, and it's also why they're 7-30. They were 29% on threes, and if they're going to have CJ McCollum shoot 1 of 14 from the field, they're not going to win. They're just not. He was 1 of 14 for the field and 1 of 7 on threes. And I thought the Wolves were good defensively, especially inside. Rudy was awesome locking down the paint. Minnesota only won points in the paint by 2 in this game, but they were so good outside the arc, and they had such a big advantage there. And it didn't matter as much. But Rudy was great. He was able to play drop for most of the game because of the Pelicans personnel, and had those 6 blocks, which is the most he's had in a really long time. But Rudy was very good. The defense was solid overall. Besides the first quarter and all the fast break stuff they gave up right away in the third quarter, the defense was absolute lockdown. 21 points in the second quarter, 21 in the third, and 22 in the fourth for New Orleans. It was just a cold start defensively, and like 3, 4, 5 easy buckets to start the third quarter. Besides that, it was awesome. Really good defense for Minnesota. And then closing, another close game that was a little closer than it should have been, like the Clippers game, which isn't great. It's not a great sign, but it is a good sign to see Minnesota take a 1-possession game and stretch it into a 7-point win because they did enough defensively and at the free throw line to maintain that lead or push that lead back up to multiple possessions, which is what we saw in this one. All right. Let's close with studs and duds. We'll take a peek at what's next for the schedule as well. That's how we'll close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy, you name it. I love going to it. My wife and I go to all of the above, tons of sporting events. We'll bring our kids to sporting events, not as much music, theater, or comedy at this point. But yeah, I mean, like, we love all kinds of music. We love going to stand-up shows. We love going to Broadway shows. And it's always unforgettable time to go to any live event. Really is an unforgettable time. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets for an upcoming game on the Game Time app. We were traveling, and I wanted to see a game. Game Time Picks, you can find amazing deals. You can even see the view from your seat before you buy. And the super deal that they offer is always particularly impressive. Among all the things they offer, the super deal is where you want to go, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds for this one. So Anthony Edwards is an obvious one. We talked about the fourth quarter issues, but he was good on both ends. Great in the first quarter. 32 points on 21 shots. Like, you're a stud every time if that's what you turn in. 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. He did have 4 turnovers, but this was a good Ant game. And man, 7 of 11 for 3 again. Did get to the line 6 times, which was very nice to see. I thought, again, the officiating was subpar. And Minnesota, again, was subpar from the free throw line. They were just 13 of 19 as a team, and nobody was like the main culprit. They just had a bunch of guys miss 1 free throw. Like, Rudy missed 1, Ant missed 1, Conley missed 1, Naz missed 1. Julius missed 2. So it was an overall team issue, but it was very good. I think I'm gonna give Julius Randle a stud in this game, and like it's tough because I typically only go with 3, and that means I'm gonna have to kick out either Rudy or Naz. It's tough, but Julius was genuinely good, especially early in this game, and I thought defensively his physicality on Zion was much needed. I know Williamson still had 22 points on 15 shots, but he turned it over 4 times, and made him work for it. I thought he did a good job when he guarded Zion. Randall had 16 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 1 of 4 on threes, got to the line 5 times, 6 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, and was kind of like a clear, second star in this game. Like a lot of, those second star type players, 16, 6, and 3, and solid defense, especially from a guy who's not known for solid defense like Julius Randle. That's positive. I thought he had a really good game. And now I'm stuck between Rudy and Naz. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give them each a half a star. Actually, I'm going to split Naz and Randle because Naz, missed a lot of threes, was a little spotty defensively, got a dumb technical. I'm nitpicking now because he was great. But the fourth quarter that Naz put together was huge. We talked about him already. 13 points, 12 rebounds, 6 of 16 shooting, 1 of 5 outside the arc, missed his only free throw attempt. 6 offensive rebounds. He did have 3 turnovers, a block, and an assist, but a really solid game from Naz Reid. And as I said earlier, it was his movement on offense without the ball that allowed him to score so many. I mean, like rare is the game where Naz has 5 made 2-point baskets, and that's what we saw in this one. And kudos to him for like, hey, outside shots not falling. I have to find some shots. I have to move my feet. I have to do something a little bit differently, and he did that in this game. Last stud is Rudy Gobert, 7 points on 3 of 4 shooting, but he had 14 rebounds, 6 blocks, and 4 assists in this game, and only a couple of turnovers in 35 minutes. I thought Rudy really controlled the paint. And yeah, he gave up a couple offensive rebounds to Misi, but guy's active. And Rudy, like Zion had limited opportunities in the paint, which is saying a lot. CJ McCollum was 1 of 14 shooting, and half his shots were twos. A lot of mid-range stuff, but Rudy got out there and made life difficult. He blocked a jumper from, I think it was McCollum, actually. He blocked one of his jumpers. Just mucked things up a little bit. I thought it was a good Rudy performance and a really nice matchup for him, as tough as it is for the Wolves backcourt from a ball handling perspective to try and initiate any sort of offense again. This is a nice matchup for Rudy because there aren't stretch bigs that he's got to worry about. It's Zion would rather be in the paint, and Misi would obviously rather be in the paint. Like, for the most part, Daniel Tice in his 13 minutes, although he did make a 3, would rather be in the paint. So good matchup for Rudy, and I thought he performed well. Duds, I'm going to go Jaden McDaniels, mostly just because I need to pick somebody. Jaden was quiet. I thought the defense was good overall for him. He was obviously part of holding the backcourt. I mean, DeJounte Murray did have 29 points, but making life challenging, at least for the backcourt for the Pelicans. He was only 2 of 9 shooting. He did it a nice shot in the fourth quarter that was big. It just hung on the rim and dropped. A tough 2 that was a big make for Jaden, but had 5 points, had 9 shots, was only 1 of 6 on threes after being 3 of 3 Monday night, which is kind of the Jaden experience, but a little bit disappointing for sure from Jaden. All right, that's all for this one. It was a solid win. Like, I know it's the Pelicans, but the emotions of Zion back, it's the front end of a back-to-back for them. So, like, they were fresh. They had the rest advantage. They had the travel advantage. They were at home. A nice win for Minnesota to push the record back to 19-17. And with Orlando on tap coming up here on Thursday night, which is an NBA TV game. And like Orlando hasn't been playing great lately. We'll preview this Thursday. I don't want to spend too much time in Orlando today, but we'll preview that matchup before Thursday night's game. So tomorrow's show, we'll talk about it. But let's see, the Minnesota. So after this win, now the Wolves, like, games are still ongoing as I'm recording this, but they're 8th in the West, and they are they are a game behind the Clippers, who they do hold the tiebreaker against, and they're a game behind the Lakers, who they also hold the tiebreaker against. They're only a game and a half behind Dallas for fifth, who I believe they've split 2 games against to this point in the season. So it's all still very jumbled together in the West, with them only a game out, a game in the loss column, you could say it that way, out of fifth place in the Western Conference. So very good for Minnesota to be able to get this win headed into Orlando on Thursday night. We'll talk about that games Thursday. We'll talk about some other lineup stuff now that a lot has changed over the past few games. That's what we'll do on Thursday's show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on either Roku or Amazon Fire TV, and you can watch there. A reminder, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter. It'll be in your inbox Monday through Friday. You can sign up at LockedOnDaily.com. It's one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.